It was a crisp Saturday morning at Willowbrook Park, the kind of day when sunlight filtered through the trees just enough to warm the grass without chasing away the cool breeze. Ethan Miller, a single father with calloused hands and tired eyes, sat on a weathered wooden bench sipping from a paper cup of lukewarm coffee while his 6-year-old son, Liam, darted across the playground, chasing pigeons with boundless energy. The past year had been a relentless struggle, balancing his construction jobs, taking odd shifts at night, and doing everything possible to keep their modest apartment and food on the table, but moments like this, where he could watch his boy laugh freely, made every hardship feel worth it. Just as he was about to call Liam over for a snack, a sharp, terrified cry pierced the usual park chatter. Ethan's head snapped toward the source of the sound, and his eyes locked on a little girl standing by the slide, her small hands clawing desperately at her throat, her face turning an alarming shade of purple. Panic erupted around her, parents gasping, children pointing, strangers fumbling for their phones, yet no one moved close enough to help. Ethan didn't think, instinct overrode everything. He dropped his coffee, sprinted across the playground, and slid to his knees beside her. "It's okay, sweetheart, I've got you," he said in a calm but urgent tone, though his own heart pounded violently in his chest. He recognized the signs immediately. She was choking, and seconds mattered. Wrapping his arms around her from behind, he performed the Heimlich maneuver, delivering quick, firm thrusts to her small ribcage. The crowd seemed to hold its breath until a sticky piece of hard candy shot from her mouth and bounced onto the sand. The girl gasped, her lungs filling with sweet, life-giving air, and tears streamed down her cheeks as she clung to his arm. "You're safe now," Ethan murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her damp forehead, making sure she could breathe normally. Around them, whispers rose, a mixture of relief and awe, but Ethan barely noticed. His focus remained on the child in front of him. He didn't know her name, didn't know where she came from, and certainly didn't know that this single, selfless act would soon draw him into a world far beyond anything he could imagine. For now, all that mattered was that she was alive. The little girl's sobs had barely subsided when the sharp click of expensive heels cut through the air, and a tall, elegant woman with perfectly styled hair came rushing across the playground. Her designer coat billowed as she dropped to her knees, gathering the child into her arms with trembling hands, pressing frantic kisses to her forehead. "Oh my God, Emily! Are you okay?" she cried, her voice breaking between relief and fear. Ethan stepped back instinctively, giving them space, feeling the weight of the adrenaline slowly leave his body. The woman looked up at him then, her eyes glassy but filled with gratitude. "Thank you, you saved my daughter," she whispered, the words shaky but sincere. Before Ethan could say anything, a pair of imposing security guards in black suits appeared, scanning the area with trained precision. They moved in quickly, one placing a steadying hand on the woman's shoulder, the other shielding the girl from curious onlookers. Without further explanation, they began guiding the mother and child away toward the park's exit, where a sleek black car waited. The whole thing happened so fast that Ethan barely had time to process it. One moment he was kneeling in the sand, the next, the girl he had just saved was gone, swallowed up by a world far different from his own. Around him, the crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring about the incident, some casting curious glances his way, others already lost in their own conversations. Liam tugged at his sleeve, oblivious to the tension that had just unfolded, his small voice asking, "Dad, can we get ice cream now?" Ethan managed a faint smile and nodded, taking his son's hand and walking toward the vendor. As they strolled away, he felt no need to linger on what had happened. To him, it was simple: you help when you can, and you move on. He didn't know that the girl's name, Emily Grant, was whispered in boardrooms and across magazine covers, or that her father was Alexander Grant, one of the wealthiest and most influential CEOs in the country. He didn't know that in just a few hours, security footage of his face would be studied in a skyscraper office, or that a man with limitless resources would be determined to find him. For Ethan, it was just another day in the park with his son, unaware that the choices he made that morning would ripple far beyond anything he could imagine. High above the city skyline, in a glass-walled office that seemed to touch the clouds, Alexander Grant stood with his hands gripping the back of a leather chair, his eyes fixed on the paused frame of a surveillance video. On the screen, a man in worn jeans and a faded hoodie knelt beside his daughter, Emily, his strong hands working quickly to save her life. Alexander's jaw tightened as he hit play, watching the stranger's decisive movements, the way he shielded Emily even after the danger had passed. Gratitude swelled in his chest, but it was tangled with an unease he couldn't name. He was a man accustomed to control, yet here was a moment where his vast resources, his security team, his influence, had meant nothing. "Who is he?" Alexander asked sharply, his voice low but edged with urgency. Across the desk, his head of security shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, we ran facial recognition on all available footage, but there's no match in our databases. He left the park with a young boy before we could approach him." Alexander's gaze hardened. "Then expand the search. Use every contact, every resource. This man saved my daughter, and I won't let that go unanswered." The order carried the weight of an unbreakable promise, and within minutes, phone calls were being made, contacts alerted, and quiet inquiries sent across the city. Meanwhile, in a modest two-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, Ethan was kneeling under his kitchen sink, tightening a stubborn pipe while Liam sat at the table coloring. He thought briefly about the little girl from the park, wondering if she was okay, then pushed the thought aside. There was rent to pay, bills piling up, and no room for distractions. As the evening settled in, he had no idea that his name was being quietly passed through networks of influence he couldn't begin to imagine, or that a billionaire's gratitude had turned into a relentless determination to find him. In Alexander Grant's world, debts were repaid with interest, and the man who had saved Emily's life was about to become more than a nameless face in a grainy video. He was about to be pulled into a life-changing encounter that would shake the walls of the world he knew. 2 days later, Ethan was hauling lumber across a construction site when a sleek black SUV rolled to a stop just beyond the chain-link fence, its tinted windows reflecting the midday sun. A tall man in a tailored suit stepped out, scanning the workers until his eyes landed on Ethan. "Ethan Miller," he called out, his tone leaving no room for uncertainty. Ethan set the boards down slowly, wariness flickering across his face. "Yeah, that's me," he replied, wiping the sweat from his brow. The man's expression remained professional but carried an undercurrent of urgency. "The CEO of Grant Enterprises would like to meet you. Now." Ethan almost laughed, assuming it was some kind of scam, but the man's unwavering gaze told him otherwise. Within the hour, he found himself stepping into a glass elevator that whisked him up to the penthouse floor of one of the tallest buildings in the city. When the doors opened, he was met by Alexander Grant himself, broad-shouldered, immaculately dressed, and radiating the kind of authority that made people stand straighter without realizing it. "Mr. Miller," Alexander said, extending a hand, "you saved my daughter's life. I don't forget things like that." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, shaking his hand. "I just did what anyone would have done," he said quietly. Alexander's gaze softened. "No, most people didn't. You acted when it mattered." Just then, small footsteps padded across the marble floor, and Emily appeared, clutching a folded piece of paper. Her shy smile widened when she saw him, and she handed over a drawing, stick figures of Ethan, Emily, and a big red heart between them. "Thank you for saving me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's throat tightened as he knelt to her level. Alexander watched silently for a moment before speaking again. "I want to offer you something, not charity, but opportunity. You have a courage I respect. I believe we can do something good together." Ethan hesitated, glancing toward Liam, who had been allowed to come along and was now staring wide-eyed at the towering city view. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a door opening to a future that didn't feel like a constant uphill climb. What began as a desperate act in a crowded park had become the bridge between two worlds that never should have met, and neither man would leave that room the same.